of the meeting of the Central Midlands Regional Transit Authority Service Committee to convene, and we'll begin with the adoption of the agenda. It's been determined we have a quorum. We'll begin with adoption of the agenda. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
I make a motion to adopt the agenda.
Mr. Moved, and is there a second?
A second.
A second by Mr. Fergus. Would you call the roll, Juliet?
Mr. Brennan,
Yes.
Mr. Ratio, Mr. Fergus,
Yes.
Ms. Gleaton,
Yes.
Ms. Mood.
Yes. Okay, so the motion passes. All right, so we'll begin with our next item. I'll start going to our next item, number 3, a report from the Midlands Transit Riders. Do we have someone from the Transit Riders with us? Don't see anybody on the screen. You don't, okay. Well, we'll move on. If they join us later, we can come back. And then number 4 is the adoption of the minutes from February 9th. Do I have a motion to adopt the minutes?
So moved.
I make a motion to adopt the minutes.
Been moved and seconded. We'll call the roll on the minutes, please, Juliet.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Brennan, Mr.
Yes.
Ratio, Mr. Fergus,
Yes.
Ms. Gleaton,
Yes.
Ms. Mood.
Yes. Okay, the motion passes and we've adopted the minutes. So we're now on item 5A, passenger amenities. And I think I saw Zane McGee, you with us today, Zane?
Yes.
All right, over to you then.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. The main progress we've made in the past month has been that we submitted 7 sites to SCDOT. And of those 7, 2 of those were already approved. And then the other 5 we're still waiting on. I've been in contact with them and they haven't provided any major questions yet. So I'm anticipating that those 5 will move forward. They're just working them through their system. Those 2 that were approved, AOS plans to start construction on those next week. And also, know the questions coming on Stop 1037 and the Forest Acres. I did speak with DOT since I was in contact with them on those permits to just kind of get. They had done a little bit of work on that as far as contacting Forest Acres, so I have spoken with them to see kind of where they had left off with that. But I still plan to reach out to Forest Acres on that stop.
Okay, thanks. Does anyone have questions for Mr. McGee? If not, then we'll accept that report as information. Thank you so much, Zane.
Thank you.
And we'll move on to 5B, and that's the Reimagine the Comet. Eric, are you with us? Or Mr. Wag?
Yes, I am here.
Okay.
We should have Ricky here from Jared Walker and Associates. He's just going to provide a presentation of everything that has been worked on thus far, and based on the board's recommendation of the 60-40 split. Ricky, there you go. Take it away.
Yep. I'm here. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
All right, great. All right, well, thank you everyone for having me today here to present to you and talk a little bit about the process of Reimagine the Comet. Today, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how the process has been, how we got to where we are now, the draft plan and what that's like, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the next steps that are coming up. So the original purpose of Reimagining the Comet and why we're doing this plan, it's basically a plan to reconsider the entire regional bus network. It is a partnership between the Comet, Regional Council of Governments and local cities and counties. And what it is, it's a plan for the next 10 years that we're developing. This study involves an existing conditions analysis in which we're analyzing the existing system. We looked at ridership patterns and surveying. And from there, we developed 2 different alternatives to show what the network could look like. I'll go over those in a little bit. And then plan for the new network and for the next 10 years. So a lot of this has been things that I've presented to the board before and you may have seen, but it's always good to have a refresher to understand what the process has been throughout everything. So when we're talking about redesigning a transit network, there's essentially two ways in which we can go. We can design a network based around getting a lot of ridership, right? Based around getting a lot of people to use transit. Or we can design a network around getting buses to go to a lot of places. And that way you reach a lot of places, but in that case, you would be spreading out the service, spreading out thin. So you might get a lot of buses that go to a lot of places, but buses might go every 60 minutes or so. If you were to concentrate service into getting high ridership, then that would be concentrating the buses into the densest corridors so that a bus might come every 10, 15 minutes or so. So these two goals are opposite. The more that you do of one, that means the less that you do of the other. You can't do both at the same dollar, but they both have important goals that are good to talk about and things that are important to most people. So if you were to concentrate service to get high ridership and high frequency, you'll be thinking like a business, right? Because more people will be using transit, that means that there's a lower subsidy per passenger. Because a lot of people are using transit, it would support dense and walkable development. It would also maximize the reduction of emissions and the reductions of vehicles miles traveled, things that are important to a lot of people. If you were to spread the service out to a coverage goal, then you'd be thinking like a public service, which means that you would try to have access for all so that everybody has a little bit of service, even if it's not very useful. You would be providing lifeline access for every home and job in case people that normally drive aren't able to drive. And you would provide service to every region, every place in the city, which is something that's important to some people. Now, the Comet today splits their resources, allocating about 45% of resources to ridership and 45% of resources to coverage. Within that, there's also about a 10% duplication. That 10% duplication comes from routes that are overlapping a little too close to each other. So they're not really achieving either ridership or coverage. They're really just duplicating things that are already there. So there is the conflict between ridership and coverage, and you can't do both with the same dollar, which means that in order to do that, we need to pick a point that is somewhere in between one or the other. It doesn't have to be one or the other exclusively. It can be one point within it. And in order to help the board make a decision on what this should be, we developed network alternatives. So this is the existing network. It is 45-45 split. And from there, we developed the two concepts. And the two concepts go into the ridership direction and to the coverage direction. The coverage concept that we developed is about a 50-50 split. So we took out the duplication and reinvested it into service. And then the ridership concept that we developed is more of an 80-20 split. So allocating 80% of resources to ridership and 20% of resources to coverage. Now, with these concepts, we did a lot of analysis on the outcomes of what this network would be and what it means for the people that live in the region. And in doing so, just to show a little bit of an example of the analysis that we did, these are diagrams that show where you can get to in 45 minutes from a point in downtown. So in the ridership network, you can see this big blob that shows all the places you can get to. The light blue shows places that you can get to in addition to where you can get to today. So the ridership network expands that a lot. The coverage network expands it a little bit. You can see that there's some blue over here on Broad Road and slightly more blue in some of these corridors. And they both show better job access compared to the existing network. So in the coverage network, you can see that a person standing in downtown can get to 7.5% more jobs, or 10% more residents can get to downtown. In the ridership network, you can get to 17% more jobs, and 31% more residents can get to downtown. So you can see the improvement in access in each of these concepts. That's just a point in downtown, but we can run this analysis for anywhere in the region, and we did. And so we came up with this map. Blue means that you can reach more jobs than in the existing network. The darker the blue, the more jobs that you can reach. Red means that you can reach less jobs. So this is the map for the change in job access for coverage. And you see that there is quite a bit of blue throughout the entire region. It is an improvement for most people. There are some places that have a little bit of red, but overall, it is a great improvement for most people.
And the dots, Ricky, the dots are what on that map?
Each dot represents 50 residents.
50 residents, okay.
That's right. Yep. So that is the
Right.
coverage map. And this is the ridership map. And you can see that the dots are there's more blue dots and the blue is darker in most places. So you see that there is even a greater improvement in access to jobs with the ridership network compared to existing.
Join the meeting.
So with those two concepts, we did an extensive public engagement phase in which we heard from the public, we heard what people think, and then we went to the board to get a decision to be made on what the split should be for the comment and what is right according to what the public thinks and the values that the community and the board represents. And as a result, the board, looking at all of that, came up to the decision to proceed with a 60-40 split. That means allocating 60% of the resources to ridership and 40% of the resources to coverage. So it is steering a little more in the ridership direction, but not too much, not to the extreme of the ridership concept. And so that is the basis that we use in order to develop the draft plan that we came up with. This is the existing network, and I'm showing this first to then show the draft plan, and we can talk a little bit about the differences. So in the existing network, this map, the colors in this map is the same color scheme that we always use. The dark blue represents routes that come every 30 minutes. And you can see those along the main corridors on North Main, Faro, Two Notch, Forest, etc., using the 101, 301, 501, 701, and so on. The routes that are light blue are routes that come every 60 minutes. And you can see that that's most of the routes in the system. And the routes that are this tan yellowish color are routes that come every more than 60 minutes, either every 90 or every 120 minutes. So this is the existing network. And now this is the draft plan. In the draft plan, just at a first glance, you can see that there are more dark blue lines. So you still see the same corridors along North Main, Faro, Two Notch, Forest, etc. But there's also more frequencies to show those 30-minute routes down along Shop, similar to today's 61, and then on Broad River, similar to today's 801. Now, the numbers on this map are different than the numbers in the existing network because the way that we drew the network, it's not exactly the same routes. We will make updated maps that show similar numbers because I think that might be easier for people to see. But as we talk today, we can definitely talk about what route relates to what corridor and how it relates to the existing network. So not a problem. You can see there were also some additional improvements along some of these corridors. So from the corridor on Faro, which is today's 301, here it's the 2. We extended the 30-minute service all the way up to Midlands Technical College, which is a pretty good destination that merits having this higher frequency. Also, the corridor on Forest with the 701, we extended the frequency along today's 75 over to Columbia Place Mall. There's a lot of activity that's going to come up in there in the next few years, so it's good that there's additional frequency there to provide more transit. Those are the main improvements in frequency along different corridors. But in order to pay for this, this means that there are places that don't have service that did have service before. And those are basically the routes that were the least productive routes, the routes that had the least riders per dollar that's spent into transit. And those are the 88, which was the orbital route coming every, I think, 90 minutes. We took that out. We also took out the 77 that used to go up here over to Polo over here. We took out the 55 and the 57 all the way up here on Clemson and all the way up to Summit. And then we took out the 46 doing this loop over here. We took that out. And so in taking out those least productive routes, we were able to invest into the higher frequency into these corridors. And in doing so, we basically shifted into the 60-40 split that the board approved. And this is what that network would look like. So it's important to note that this network is not final. It is the draft network, which means that this isn't the last opportunity to make any changes. Our plan for the future with this network right now is to do the same outcomes analysis that I went over that we did for for the concepts phase. So do all of those access analysis for this and compare it to existing and see what that's like. We'll develop a report and then we'll take it out to the public. And after we get public feedback, then we'll gather that together. We'll come back to the board before we make any of this final. So the purpose of this network and project as we're doing it is to basically serve as a guided document so that we have this network that the comic can then look at in the future when they're looking to make changes and refer to it to help them guide in making decisions to move forward. So the next steps I just talked about, and so analyze the network, come up with the report, and then do the public outreach phase. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, can you just can you leave the screen on the map, because I think that may be where people are focused anyway. And I would just, I just make really a comment is that it's, it's obvious that what doesn't change are the routes in Lexington County, because they are established on a different basis from the routes in the overall system. That being that Lexington County's chosen to buy the routes they want and pay the cost of those routes. And so that didn't enter into the kind of analysis and plan that you're presenting to us. Am I accurate on that?
That is correct. It is not shown, and nothing different is shown on here. It is exactly the same in Lexington County. As part of the project, we will show some possible things that could be done over in Lexington County, but we're not showing them as part of all this. It'll be more like possible menu of options that can be done in the future.
I think that would be helpful, because I want us to have public participation from Lexington, because they may want to make a different choice about how they approach transit. And so having some choices, the way that you present them, saying this is not the draft plan, but these are some options that could be considered, I believe would be very helpful both to the population in Lexington County and to the leadership there. And I want to say too, I know Mr. Jenkins is on the call, and so Mr. Jenkins, you jump in anywhere where you want to also, and anyone else who's on the call other than in addition to the voting committee members. Okay.
Yes, Madam Chair, before you move on.
Yeah, I'm not moving on. I'm just waiting for questions. So come right in.
Yeah, on that Route 88, Elimination, that is the route that goes from up in the St. Andrews area to Midland Tech. See, so I question whether we can eliminate that route. See, COVID has killed most of the ridership, but we're basing that on time in the future, not now.
All
So
right, can you comment on that, Ricky?
Yeah, sure. So Route 88 is, I think it was the least productive route in the system, the route that got the least ridership, either the lowest or the second lowest, I don't recall. And it's a route that along a lot of where it goes, there's other routes that people can usually take, and they're usually more frequent and faster for them to get to many more places. So the 88, in generally the way that it is today, doesn't have a lot of value to the network as a whole. So taking that out doesn't really change job access a lot.
All right, so let me say my understanding of that 88 route was that cross town that we tried to see if it was possible to get people from the southeast over to the northwest in a more efficient way. But in fact, I remember how many complications there were for making connections at stops. And that was one thing that made the route so long that I think it contributed to it not having much ridership. But would you speak to Mr. Fergus' concern about how then do people access Midlands Tech? I'm looking for that on the map.
So let me explain this. If someone's going all the way from one end of the 88 over to the other over here, so if someone's going over from the Walmart way down here on Garner's Ferry over to Dutch Square Center, which is basically going the 88 all the way, Today, the 88, I think it has a frequency of every 90 minutes, which means that someone that has to be somewhere at a certain time doesn't really have the flexibility of just going out and taking the bus when the bus is coming. They have to go when they need to get there. So on average, a person would have to wait 45 minutes for the 88, right? Half the frequency. And in doing so, they would grab the 88 and then they would go along this pretty circuitous way all the way around. Instead, in this network today, in the draft plan, they could take this route along Divine and Millwood, we're calling the 5, could take that route to downtown, in downtown transfer with a time transfer that would only wait 5 minutes, and then take the route 8 all the way out to Dutch Square Center. So on average, a person would wait 15 minutes at the beginning, 5 minutes to transfer. So a total wait of 20 minutes on average, whereas with the existing 88, a person would wait an average of 45 minutes. So it is actually faster without the 88 and with the higher frequency for people to get from one end to the other.
All right, and so then if you were on, I'm looking at the path of the 88 and the other places it would go through that with the potential for picking up riders. And then the alternative for riders in those places would be to take the corridor route downtown and do the same time transfer and then go out where they were going. Is that to the ultimate?
Exactly, that's correct. And with the increased frequency, in most times that it's actually faster than waiting for the 88 because the 88 is so infrequent.
Okay, and Mr. Fergus, did that address your question
No,
about
that 88,
Midlands?
that 88 crosses 2 notch. It crosses, it goes up Beltline, crosses North Main.
Yep.
Right.
Then to Sunset, you know.
Yep.
But we're talking about the future. So that did have a decent ridership prior to COVID. See, so if you look at ridership now, we can't make any evaluation because COVID has almost reduced all of them.
Well, that is true, but if my memory serves me well, I think we have always struggled with ridership on the 88. Now, there may have been some links in that where we had more riders, but for the most part, overall ridership on the 88 is, as I recall, has always been, has always had a struggle. And I think it's because of what we're hearing here is just how long it takes to do it. It comes, but it doesn't come very, it comes with a frequency and with a wait time that doesn't make it an attractive option for people, except what you're saying, Mr. Fergus, is except in some legs of that route. And so I think the plan that says, how would people who would normally catch the 88 get to where they're going will be an important part of the public discussion on that.
And what we are trying to do is to get folks to be able to catch these buses without coming to the transit center. And now you're putting them back on the transit center one place, taking them off another, because that was the reason for the super stops. So if you're saying, I'm catching the bus down at Midland Tech, now I have to catch it on the van and catch a bus down on the van or Rosewood. The only place I can go is back to the transit center to catch a bus to go to the other end of 88.
Yep, that's right. And because of the way that moving around in a transit network works, going to downtown to transfer is much faster. And it's better for passengers.
And so I think what I have to do when I look at this, Mr. Fergus, is to kind of disassociate this from thinking about how do we manage the transfer. I mean, we know we've been through this discussion about time transfer, so we get why we do that. But I think the what clutters that up right now is that the existing transfer stop, has some issues unrelated to this plan. And so a different kind of downtown transfer point may take care of those and and still serve the purposes of the modification of the routes in the draft. Am I making any sense on that?
Yes, and also we're developing the Lucius Road stop. So that's another one that, you know, to get
Exactly.
to get, you know, passengers from a transit center to one of the super stops. So
Right,
yes, so you have to take that in consideration.
right. Okay,
Madam Chair, may I
I
ask a
saw Mr.
question?
Jenkins. Yes, Mr. Jenkins.
Yeah, I was wondering why we're not showing the ridership and in Lexington County, because I have a strong feeling that doing this gas hike and all this stuff, a lot of the stuff is going to pick up. A lot. You can have a lot more ridership than you realize. I mean, it just hadn't happened yet.
Right.
But
And that was the point the point I was trying to raise a little bit earlier, is that this design doesn't show proposed route changes for Lexington County because Lexington County makes that decision on a different basis. But what I was hearing Ricky assure us is that what they will do, and I don't know if you have a slide of that, Ricky, that you could show us, but what they will do in the public participation part is to show what other options Lexington County may want to exercise in terms of creating new routes. But this doesn't propose new routes for them because we don't really have the capacity to do that without their requesting or buying in up front.
right.
So is there a way that can you show us any of those things that you mentioned about alternative possibilities for Lexington County? Ricky, do you have a slide that shows that?
I don't have any of that mapped out in a way that I can show it.
Okay.
However, I'll explain that the exercise between, you know, going to the draft plan uses the same resources as the existing network. And for that reason, there are no changes in Lexington County. And so we will show something that shows 30-minute service going along, for example, something along Sunset, something along Gervais and Kaplan and Augusta all the way west. And then something else down here. I'm not exactly sure on the details right now, but we will show that, and that'll be something that's basically separate from this because this uses the resources from the existing network.
Mm-hmm.
And with the existing networks, we wouldn't be able to make any changes over here. So that'll be something that's separate.
All right, so let me see if I got what you said. The alternatives in Lexington County would follow the same logic, and that would say that you would increase service frequency along those major corridors, just as you're doing in the Richland County part of it.
Yeah, with a little bit of restructuring to make things a little straighter and a little better in those sense. But yes, it'll be increasing frequency along some main corridors.
And then, Mr. Jenkins, that can be costed out in terms of what that would require of Lexington County in terms of an investment. Am I right?
Exactly, that's what we'll do.
Okay.
Okay, understandable now. Okay.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, while we're at this point,
Mm-hmm.
I would like for the board to discuss, say maybe a month or two of free ridership that we can, with all this gas thing, that we can get Pam to do some PR and we can, you know, encourage ridership with at least a month or two of free ridership over the entire line.
All right. Well, what you're
support.
bringing up is what kind of motions we want to take from the committee to the board. And the first basic motion that I was going to ask for from the group is whether we are satisfied enough with the draft plan that's here to recommend to the board that they approve its going out for public input. So that's the next stop in the plan. And then what I'm hearing from you is we may want to make a second motion that recommends to the board that just what you said, that the comment offer 1 to 2 months of free ridership, particularly in this time of gasoline cost crisis, to stimulate ridership on the existing system. Is that what you're saying?
But on the first motion, I don't think this ridership draft is ready to be presented. Because it's not presenting a future ridership. It's only, and we've been through this before. We'll have to wait to ridership, super stops and everything settled before we go into,
Well, here's where I see the future. I'm looking at what you've got up before us now, but I think where the future is in this plan is back to the map that shows us with the 60-40 ridership coverage split, what access to jobs there would be with the system. Can you go back to that one, to that, Ricky?
You want to see the concepts access to jobs? Because we haven't done the analysis for access to jobs for this draft plan, because we're waiting to make sure that you're okay with it.
Okay,
So-
okay, all right, but
Cool.
yeah, we'll go back to the concept one and let's
Yeah,
just
sure.
look at that.
And Ms.
This is
Mooney,
ridership.
If I may add, this is Eric Harris.
Yes.
That the data that was used to do the design was pre-pandemic numbers. So this assumes that we are back at full service, and that's why we can use it as a service monitoring document as we start to make adjustments to the system for the future. It doesn't mean that it has to be the end all be all, but this also allows us to be able to have a guideway based on access to jobs, transit propensity and things of that nature, to make sure we're making the best decision that will be in the best interest of the community. So that's, the information that we received from that public outreach period and what we will receive again once we take the final, I guess you can call it draft, back out to the public.
Okay, so what you're saying is that what this was based on in terms of ridership analysis was really pre-COVID ridership.
That is correct.
but Madam Chair,
Does that help, Mr. Burgess?
no, because if this data is pre-COVID, that means this data is 3 years old.
It is.
So
And what we
growth-
know from our ridership is that we are how much we are down from that point in time, right? But I think, and I'm gonna ask again, just to show this on the screen, the access to jobs concept slide, because I think that is really the big focus of, and why the board wanted to make something of a shift to the ridership concept was to make it easier and quicker for more people to get to more jobs. So can you show us that slide again?
Yeah, here it is. Can you see my screen?
No, I'm just seeing you right now.
Oh, okay. Let me try to share again. I thought I was sharing. Okay, can you see it now?
Yes, now we got it.
Great. So this is coverage, and then this is ridership. And in ridership, you can see how much more blue there is and how much darker the blue is, which means people have more access to jobs. And that is usually what you get when you shift a little bit more towards ridership.
Mhm.
So the draft plan won't be quite all the way like this one, but it will definitely have more blue than the coverage and more darker blue that will show that more people have more access to more jobs.
So is that contrast clear to the committee members? What that picture shows us? Go back to the coverage one.
Yep.
That's more like the existing system.
Yep, and the colors represent how coverage is different from existing. And then here is ridership, which has more improvement compared to existing.
So Ms. Mood,
Yes,
the difference between those two is basically telling us that we are allowing our workforce more transportation options to open up to getting to jobs. Am I reading that right?
exactly.
Wonderful. I
And
think that's
getting to
fantastic.
more and to getting more people to more jobs quicker.
Okay,
That's-
great. Because that's been a lot of feedback I've gotten from staffing agencies, workforce development nonprofits, is that is a big part of growing our economy, is that access for our workforce. So I think that's wonderful.
Okay. And Will, I'm not sure at what point in this process, because we've been at it for a while, and I'm not sure when you came on, but actually, that was a big part of the motivation to say, to try to find in this kind of analysis and plan, what kind of changes would we need to make to meet those needs that you're hearing described. So,
Excellent.
okay. Any other questions from board members or anybody else in the room or on the call? Okay, well, if I don't hear any more questions, are we ready for a motion from the committee to the board to approve having the draft plan go out for public comment? Because that is an important step, and it needs to go out before it's carved in stone. So before the board makes any decisions about actual changes, this draft plan would need to go out for public comment. And so are we ready to make a motion from the committee to the board to allow the draft plan to go out, or to approve the draft plan to go out for public comment? Can I get a motion on that?
I make a motion that we go ahead on it and do what we need to do, and for them to bring it back to the board.
That's exactly right, Ms. Gleaton, that it'll go out for public comment, then it comes back to the board with the public comment before any final decisions are made on any changes that would be a part of the plan. So, do we need to have a restatement of that motion?
I make a motion that we do it and send it on to them.
Okay. All right. So that the motion is to recommend to the board that they approve the draft plan for a public comment. Is there a second? Mr. Brennan seconds. Any further discussion? Are we ready for the vote? Juliet, would you call the roll?
Brennan? Mr. Brennan?
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Fergus?
No.
Ms. Gleaton?
Yes.
Ms. Mood?
Yes. All right, so that motion carries. And then, Mr. Fergus, I want to go back to the other motion that you suggested about a period of free ridership. Would you want to restate that or make that motion?
Yes, the motion is that the board consider, with the gas shortage, a month or two of free riderships all through the route for at least 2 months, or further if the board so should desire.
Okay. And can I have a second to that motion?
Second.
Second from Mr. Brennan. Any further discussion of that? All right, can we call the roll, please, Juliet?
Brennan?
Yes.
Mr. Horacio? Mr. Fergus?
Yes.
Ms. Gleaton?
Yes.
Ms. Mood?
Yes. All right, so we'll have those two motions now approved to go to the board for its next meeting, and we'll get that on the agenda. Anything further that we need from Ricky and Eric on this item, 5B? All right, well, thank you very, very much. Let me ask you this. Is it possible when I think it'll be important, and this, Pam and Juliet, this is for you all too, that what Ricky presented to us today would be a part of the board packet, so that the board has a chance to look at those slides before the board meeting, when they would be entertaining our motion.
Yes, ma'am.
Can we make sure we get that as a part of the packet? Okay, because I think walking us back through those steps is very helpful to them as it was to us.
Yes, and I
Okay.
would like to request that Ricky email them to me so
I'll
that
do
I can
that.
include it in the packet.
I'll do that.
Thank you.
Got that. Thank you very much. All right, then we'll move on to item 5C, on-time performance update, Mr. Hubble.
Ms. Moot, Lenny,
I have a question. So on that free ride, does that also include paratransit?
Wait a minute. Mr. Fergus, did you intend to make that motion for all?
I think we did everything when we went free for the past 2 years, right?
How did that work during when we were fare free? How did that paratransit work then?
Wasn't it that fixed route had to be free for a certain amount of time before paratransit mirrored that? Wasn't it
Yes, ma'am.
more than a month?
Yes,
I think Rosalind knows. Rosalind?
yeah. We don't have to necessarily make DART free at the same time, since he's wanting to do it temporarily. If it extended past 2 months, then yes, DART, we could extend the same. By regulation, we had to extend the same to DART. So since this is something temporarily, he can do just fixed route.
All right, if
I'm
that's the way that works, Mr. Fergus, is that what you would intend?
I'm just
in your
wondering
motion?
if we want to do just fixed routes, you know?
I think that's the part of the population that will affect with
Okay.
increasing ridership. I
Well,
think
right,
our DART ridership is not driven as
right.
much by that as the fixed route.
I agree.
Okay. Okay. Well,
That's-
that's a helpful clarification. Thank you so much. Okay, Mr. Hubble. So in fact, what we're just saying is that we're clarifying that the motion is that fixed route service for 1 to 2 months free. Am I right? Is that's an editorial amendment
Correct.
clarification? Okay. All right. All right, Mr. Hubble, we're ready for you now, I think.
Thank you. Question, Madam Chairman, quick question.
Yes.
Are there federal funds that could possibly cover that loss in revenues with any, I guess, federal packages out there? I'm throwing it out there for staff to maybe look at.
Well, Rosalind, and you may be the one to look into that, because I don't know what we have in terms of, I know we had an infusion of COVID funds to help us through that, and I don't know the status of that, but could we just ask Rosalind and the Finance Committee to take a look at that?
Yes, ma'am. As you mentioned right now, yeah, we do use CARES Act funding that was supplemented to us to get us over the long haul. But we will look into, if he's trying to cover just for DART, we can have ask and see if there's some type of senior funding that would allow us to supplement that loss if we're doing DART free as well.
Well,
I'm talking about
that,
the
but I think
entire-
his question was really for the basic fixed route, wasn't it?
Okay.
Yeah, for the entire 2-3 months of free service due to the gas
For fixed route,
extensions.
Yeah.
In the entire Comet operation.
Okay. All right. So would you do that, Rosalind, and follow through, and you can talk with Andy and Finance so that we'd have the answers to those questions when the board discusses our motion.
yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Okay, anything else? Any other loose ends on that one? All right, we ready for Mr. Hubble then?
Thank you again, Madam Chair. I've got just a brief but exciting briefing on our on-time and performance improvement project. Just give you a little background on the project, refresh your recollection, the actions to date, and the next steps. Project background, this is really the important parts of the recutting of the runs and the like was led by RATP Dev and TMD, Transit Management Group out of San Diego. The goal was, again, to improve the OTP to somewhere in and around 85%. And it clearly has been a collaborative effort. We've over the last couple months really gotten down into the weeds on the analysis of the empirical data from the technologies on board the vehicles, really identified some issues that were otherwise would have remained uncovered and impacted OTP, and really identified those OTP impediments so that we could begin to come up with solutions, begin to knock them down. Over the last couple months, we've worked as a team to revise the running times. In many cases, the running times on a full loop, the running time going outbound from Comet Central may have had too much time in it, and yet the loop back to Comet Central may have not had enough time in it. Still, it may have been an hour-long loop, so to speak, but it really, rather than 30 minutes and 30 minutes, we've shifted it to 25 and 35 to really reflect the actual running times. Timing points, I know I've briefed the group on timing points in the past. Rather than, we have eliminated many of the timing points in the system. Some of those timing points were only a minute or two apart. And you know, the obvious question is, well, if you're only a minute from between stops, how far off schedule can you get in that 1 minute? So that one timing point becomes really a moot point almost. So we've eliminated many of those intermediate time points so that the goal is to keep the bus moving. Keep the vehicle moving on the street and get it to its terminus point. You don't want it pausing along some of these intersections mid-route, causing traffic congestion and the like. So there was emphasis put on keeping the bus moving, modifying the timing points, still establishing key timing points so that you can in fact monitor schedule adherence, and the operators can use it as a tool. And then the blocking and interlining, this gets a little complex, but you know, moving some of those interlined associated routes so that there was a better flow from the service delivery perspective, and then syncing all this up with the public timetables, a complete republication of the timetables showing the different running times throughout the day. And this really gets down into the details. We looked at 6 different daily time frames in 2 to 4 hour windows to adjust the running times as well for the environment, you know, whether it's at commute time or early morning or midday and the like. So we've adjusted, there are several adjustments made to these windows. Again, using the Swiftly empirical data that we were able to capture through the Swiftly subscription. It was instrumental in doing this analysis. I've already talked about the time points. From a qualitative perspective from the operators, we've improved the recovery and layover times. Many of these blocks had little or no recovery and layover time, so the operators were rushing so that they had 2 or 3 minutes, 5 minutes at the end of the route to use the facilities. And so that was causing schedule adherence issues. We've now accommodated that and built in some more appropriate recovery and layover times. All of these changes were subtle in nature, and so there were no Title VI impacts. So none of these changes would have to go to public hearing. They can be implemented quite readily. And then
would you just remind us about what Title VI impacts would mean?
Oh, 20, every transit authority has to have a Title VI, federal Title VI program. Your program calls for, if there are changes in excess of 25% to any one route, that that must go to a public hearing.
I see.
None of these were
Rose to that level. Okay.
rose to that level, not even close. There were a myriad of tweaks, but they were all tweaks in nature, very subtle changes. And again, we're calibrating the public timetables and maps. We're reflecting the accurate interlines. In many cases, there was a conflict between the block assignments and the public timetables with respect to interlines. We've synced it up with the timing points so the operators have the same instructions. Their timing points look exactly like the public timetables, so that there's absolute synchronicity between those. And then the accurate route profiles we found, and if you'll recall, I've talked about turn by turns and those level of details. We've gone through the process of syncing up all of these various documents so that we are sure there is what I call a single point of truth in all of this, and everybody's getting the same information. If it's incorrect, it gets changed, but it's being changed across the board. So the next steps, we're doing the run cut now. Finished that up actually this morning. I had a meeting with the team just before this committee meeting. The run cut is done, and they're moving into what's called the rostering process, which is the process where the bid packages for each operator is put together, and then that'll be turned over to Mr. Cooksey for his bidding process. Mr. Cooksey and his team are going to be running all of his operators and field supervision through an orientation training of putting an emphasis on OTP, the new schedules, using the technologies that are on board the vehicle, and a complete recalibration. I think, Lenny, that's about a 6 week, I think that's about a 6 week, yeah, 6 week, 5 week initiative that they're going to be going through prior to the implementation of these changes. So we're hoping to see a complete recalibration of the workforce. The TMD team is working with the Comet to synchronize, as I talked about, synchronize and proof the revised public timetables. We've made modifications to the timing points. We have some issues at Comet Central that we're, the technical term is we're working on the geofences to make sure that the technology is reporting accurately what's really happening, particularly in and around Comet Central. Working with the Comet on the public communications package, because we think this is all good news to the community, and that the new emphasis on being on time and delivering that service on a regular basis reliably. So we're working collaboratively on that communications package, and then revising the technology data files to support the revised run cut. We're coming up with new workflows. Matter of fact, that goes into system test this end of this week. We'll have some more information on that in the coming weeks. Targeted completion date on this whole project is May 6th, and Mr. Cooksey is ready to pull the trigger and put this on the street Sunday, May 8th.
Wow.
Madam Chair, that's all I have.
All right, does anyone have questions for Mr. Hubble? Well, I would just say, it's so wonderful to see that outline and the concrete steps now that are being taken and implemented May 8th. And what my expectation is that after the implementation of this, we may see some impacts, some smaller impacts, but after the full implementation, I not only expect to see our on time, big differences in our on time performance, but I also think it'll have an impact on the reliability complaints, because when you talk about people having the absolute synchrony between the schedules that they are expecting and the schedules that are being run, that's bound to help us in both those quarters, I think.
Yes, ma'am, and I think this goes back to Reimagine the Comet initiatives and other initiatives. I think this is this has teed up a process for Mr. Deschamps and Mr. Cooksey for effective change management. And as other changes come about, this is a means and method by which these changes can be very readily and reliably deployed. So my hats off.
That's a good point. That is a good point, that it helps us with any future changes as well.
Yeah, it is just a process now.
All right, now, Mr. Hubble, I'm sorry.
It wasn't easy, but it was a marathon, but we all believe the finish line is in sight.
All right, now, Mr. Hubble, is your plan to make this same presentation to the board?
Not at this point, ma'am, but if it's your pleasure, we would be happy to. Also, we do intend after the May 8th, after the May 8th implementation, we do plan on coming back with a how did go briefing, so to speak, to fulfill everybody's
I think it would be helpful to the board to have this same update at the next board meeting for their information.
We'd be happy to present this. We always love to talk about good news.
All right, does that meet with the agreement of others on the committee that we have the board hear this presentation? Mr. Burgess, Ms. Gleaton, that sound okay to you?
Yes.
I noticed Mr. Brennan, I think, had to leave us. So, okay. All right. Well, that is good news. And I congratulate you on the kind of work that that all of you have put into this. And I'm really expecting wonderful things to happen as a result. So thank you very much.
I'll pass that along to the team.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. All right. So we'll move on then to, that doesn't require any action on our part. We've just received that for information. We'll go to 5D. And that's the Transit Operations Report. Mr. Cooksey, Mr. Smith.
Yes, good afternoon. How's everybody doing?
Okay.
Actually, we'll hopefully won't keep you too long today as I kind of go through these slides. We look at the COVID-19, the third one in. Pretty excited. It's probably the best slide I've made since I've been here.
All right, now, are you going to share your screen with us too?
Actually, I don't have the screen to share.
All right, so
I believe it's in the packet.
Yes. Okay, so we'll follow you in the packet. Okay.
Yes. So if we get to the third slide in is our COVID-19 slide. And like I was mentioning, to me, this is like the best slide I've made since I've been here. So I actually got to put 0 on that. So it kind of overdid it, kind of got excited about it. But
that is a good slide.
That is a good, as of 3/3. So hopefully we'll continue to trend that way. And so very excited about that. Going into customer service, we did have an uptick in our complaints, and it looks like it was primarily driven by reliability, which we know has constantly been a challenge for us. And you heard Mr. Hubble, we're hoping that in time that reliability category will decrease. Now, you may have a bump initially in that area because as you make these tweaks and adjustments and the buses are actually coming on time, accustomed to what people are accustomed to now, they may actually think that, hey, my bus is late or it came early or late, but when it's actually on time, because they're accustomed to a particular time that they've been following over the years. So it'd be interesting on all of our parts to see how that trends. And then ultimately, though, the goal for that is to actually trend down. So that's how we see there. Our complaints still within, better than our target. And as far as our safety category, very, very slight increase, pretty close to flat. We did hire a new safety manager. He's getting his feet wet, Mr. Charles Hall. So he's constantly aware of our challenges and putting together different plans and programs in our safety area. And I'll get a chance in the future to bring him in so he can share some really unique things that he's trying to do.
Okay.
I know one of the topics that came up last service committee meeting was in and around bus stop cleanliness. And so I wanted to kind of take a little bit of a deeper look at what that looks like. just to kind of have an idea of how many concerns we've captured. And so we went back and we pulled really the last 14 months to see how many, conditions of the stops, complaints that came in about relocation, bus stop shelter installation and so forth. And it's actually a much lower number than I thought. So if you're looking at, we have about, at least on the RFP, about 1,500 or 1,558 bus stops throughout the system. So if you look at that number of bus stops that are cleaned or kept throughout the month over a 14-month period, or at least a 13-month period, so I calculated, you're looking at over like 20,000 different stops. So if you break that down, you're looking at 0.10 complaints. It's very, very low. But the issue with that number, and like Mr. Fergus had, in the conversation last time, a lot of it's perception. So I might be at 0.10, which is an astronomical number, but it's those 1 or 2 or 5 stops that aren't clean may give someone the impression that, hey, you know what, they're not cleaning those stops. So I think in this category, the numbers are important, but also perception, which you can't measure on a number, is equally as important. So we just have to constantly do our due diligence on that. I did try to track down where were most of those complaints coming from over the 13 months, and it looks like it was on Route 55. And weren't a lot of them, because we were only talking about 5, but it doubled what everything else had, and they were kind of spread out. We know that's an area for us to, obviously pay attention to. One new tool that I have, I briefly mentioned it before, and I'll go into more detail in the future, is our mystery shopper. There is an opportunity to add a category within the mystery shop, which will allow us to focus on bus stop cleanliness. So I have a meeting with the individual that designed and put that together to add that in. So it just gives us another tool to kind of watch that as it comes in and as the mystery shoppers are randomly riding throughout the system. So I just wanted to kind of report back some numbers so we can kind of see what that really looks like.
Well, I thank you for the attention that you've given to that, because I think you're right that that can have a disproportionate impact on the image of the system, even if you're talking about small numbers. So I think that's worth the effort, and thank you.
Yes, and we'll obviously continue to take a look at that.
We just want them all to look just like that picture.
Well, me too. So that's the model there. So we want them all to look that good. So absolutely. I added in, I wanted to just make sure I recognized a couple of employees. We recently named our operator of the year, Mr. Mitchell, and he has been with us for 42 years.
Wow.
I mean, and he's always willing to go above and beyond. He's just, if you can clone him, that would be great. But he, just a consummate professional. He's going strong, and we're very excited. He was named Operator of the Year, and we also had our Employee of the Month, because we're getting our programs up and running now, and that's Miss Pam Mays, and she's actually been with us 11 years. And what I've seen from her since I've arrived is really a tremendous amount of growth. One of the things that's facing, and I'm not sure if I spoke about it previously, that's really facing our industry. Back in 2017, I had an opportunity to be a part of a committee for workforce development in transportation in the state of Florida. And in 2017, we were forecasting around this time in 2023, we were going to have a mass exodus of transportation professionals. And the thought was, well, it's an older workforce that's aging out, and you're losing all of your knowledge, and there's no replacement. We're not turning it over quick enough. It's a national issue. But when we forecasted that, we didn't know, obviously no one knew anything about COVID, which has now expedited that 2023 to now. And that is one of the challenges that a lot of industries are having across the board, not just with bus operators, but administrative staff, is recruiting. And if you did not have a succession plan in place, you're going to find yourself in trouble. And why I bring that up, because employees like Ms. Mays, and there's several others throughout the organization that are ripe to be set up for succession planning. And, I made that a goal in this year, in 2022, is to bring that to the group, because you never know, I might not be here, or somebody else might not be here. Who's next up? Who's on the bench? So I've been able to, she's one of the individuals that had said she wanted more. She's been showing the capability of that. But I just wanted to bring that, how important in our business succession planning is, because what happens is you get new people who may come in the business, but they're trying to do old ideas that didn't work. So now you're wasting resources, effort, things that we've already tried that. Let's do something different, right? So I think that's just important. I wanted to mention that, and again, congratulate those individuals.
Well, and I would offer the congratulations of the committee also, and to recognize that they not only make an impact in the jobs they are assigned, but that kind of exemplary performance has an impact on new operators coming into the system, and so we're glad to have their example before those newcomers.
Absolutely, thank you. And now moving on to maintenance. Again, great stellar numbers in our maintenance, our preventive maintenance, based on our, again, we're just hitting our PMI numbers, so based on our miles that are triggered. So again, great job to the maintenance team. Also, on our mean distance between road miles, which are PM results, tried a little bit of a different slide on that. I'll be experimenting with some stuff going forward. Hopefully, coming up with a new look for you, but I wanted to put a trend line in, a goal line, just so we can see what that looks like. Again, we hit that goal, exceeded it actually for 12 consecutive months. So again, fantastic job for maintenance. I know it gets tougher and tougher. And as I talk about my next slide, usually I'm talking about different campaigns and things that are happening, but I think with what's going on in the world today, it's very important that we kind of keep our eye on the ball. I mentioned it at the board meeting and then previously, is looking at our fuel costs. We've had a steady increase in fuel through since December, about a 25% increase. Now, when I put this together, this was before the current outbreak that we have now. So we may be looking at even in deeper climbs. Also about a 20% increase in as far as different fluids and oils, and in a national tire shortage, which we could be facing potential increases in cost. It may cost us about $460 a tire now. We could be looking at around $900. I mean, yes, absolutely. We did secure through our maintenance team being pretty crafty, we did secure 18 tires, and then we have another back order of 50. We're hoping that shipment can get through at our current cost. But I mean, we're watching that very closely, but there's obviously a national tire shortage. So we are just, it's high priority. Any parts shortage, fuel, tires, those things are, from an operational standpoint, we're keeping a very close eye on, and obviously keeping the comment abreast if we run into any issues. One of the things here, I don't believe we'll have a fuel and oil supply issue. It's just the cost. We will have to weigh and, it's kind of look at that and take it really week by week the way it's going, actually day by day. So we'll continue to monitor that. On-time performance, you heard a great report from Mr. Hubble. So that seems to be on track, but even to add additional news to that, we saw a 3% increase over last month. Now, it's not 85. I know it's not 85. We're nowhere near that. But I mean, we're still seeing climbs each month. They're small increments. So that leads us to be very hopeful about the future. And also paratransit also saw an increase. So I'm very excited about that. Yes, ma'am. Looking at our ridership summary, again, we spoke about it previously. We were talking about the reimagine and making the decision between ridership versus coverage and so forth, and looking at where our riders are. I mean, we compared to last year, we're at a 36% decreased across the board. And, that's, and then of course, there's 2 slides down. I'll kind of talk a little bit more about that. And if we're looking at our previous month, we did have a 6% increase, but that was primarily due to the bump at USC because of the decreased service in January. We had more service in February because the other routes were basically pretty flat. So that's where we've seen that increase compared to last month. If we look at our average daily ridership, this slide tells a lot. It really tells the story of really what's been happening in the country over the last 13 months. So if we look at March on the monthly ridership, and of course it would mirror the average daily ridership, we can kind of see when they started pushing the vaccine. It was around that February, March timeframe. There was a lot going on in the country. It was kind of a, should we, shouldn't we type thing. And we had some pretty decent numbers, coming out of January and February. So you'd like to think there was a good mood for the most part in the nation as far as our ridership. And granted, we did dip a little bit in April and May, but still those numbers, if we compare them to where we are now, were more encouraging. Now, we did see a summer dip, which is, not uncommon to see it go down. But if we notice, we did pick back up in August, September, and October. But it did flatline around between 130 and 150. But you also notice that was, if you kind of correlate that to what was going on in the country as far as the climate, the vaccine. I mean, we're at that point, you're at the 5 or 6 month period for many people. A lot of people just, taking it at that time. There's a lot going on in the country to kind of sustain that number. But if you look at November through where we are now, it's almost like the bottom has dropped out. And in my opinion, and any momentum that we would have had, we really lost it during the, with this latest variant, with the Omicron, because, 106 was our second worst outing in January that we've had in 14 months. And, and granted, there was some improvement, but February was no better. So it'll be very interesting to see now that we've moved a little further away from, at least in our area where we are right now at the comment on the numbers I've reported, on really what March, April, and May are going to look like. I'm very interested to see. I know we're looking at some free ridership options that always bump up your numbers. But if we're following in line with what we've seen previously, we should automatically see some increases. And then we kind of follow the trend there. So I just found it interesting when I was looking at the ridership and what was going on in the country and our ridership, how it kind of parallels in the different things that are happening. So, in saying that, slightly off from this report, I'll just add my opinion in. I don't know if this is the right place to do that, but I do think we need to really consider when we're going free ridership that the look of not offering the same thing to paratransit is not a good look, one. Two, is it ridership or hardship? Because I heard hardship when I'm talking about increase in prices, the increase in fuel. So if it's a hardship issue, the very vulnerable in our community should very well be included in free ridership. And I just wanted to add that in. I know we've voted and you're going to move forward with it, but sometimes perception is also an issue on that particular issue, just like, so I just wanted us to add that in while we were talking about
I think that's appropriate for you to give us that input, and I appreciate that. We need to take that into account as the board makes a decision on that motion. Thank you.
You're welcome. As far as our top 6 passenger boardings, it's actually 4 on here on the next slide down. But again, those pretty much trend consistently the same each month. As far as our Gamecock ridership, again, we obviously saw spikes over January just because we had more service running and we didn't have the reduced services that we had throughout the month of January. So to report on that. On our safety side, again, we have a new person, very excited. I know I keep saying that, but I'm real excited. He has some great ideas. We did have 4 preventable accidents. You know, we're still having our challenges with the mirrors. And I have him doing a deeper dive on looking at the mirror clips. You know, what is it that we can do to I mean, it's minor damage, but necessarily still counts as a preventable. So what is it that we can do better, in reference to our mirrors? And there's some pretty good things. I mean, they went out and rode the streets and took a look at a lot of the signs and posts throughout the city of Columbia. A lot of them are too close to the street. So, and I'll be glad to share some pictures next time, shockingly close. So if you have a bus traveling down the road, the mirror extends out 12 inches, but there's a pole or a sign that's been put there that's like right on the street. Then so now you're asking the operator, now I need you to make an unsafe maneuver and move to your left. But what if I have a car here? Right, but it's not, the road isn't designed properly, or I shouldn't say properly. The way it's set up on many things that we see, you know, which risk do you mitigate? Do you tap the mirror, or do you make contact here? You know, so it's just that defensive driving before you even get to that area, knowing your route, knowing where your hot spots are, and that's our safety team. You know, making sure that we are letting operators know that, hey, this is a hot spot. This is something you have to look out for. You know, this you may
Well, and I'm thinking too that this really points up the importance of our keeping the lines of communications open with the city and the county, because I'm kind of thinking people who put up signs probably don't have in the forefront of their mind what is the level of a bus rearview mirror here.
Yes, and that's something that, you know, with our new safety team in place, person here that we can work with the comment and try to, you know, identify those individuals who can assist us, or at least let it be known, this is what we require, or here are the, you know, the measurements of our buses. This is what they are, you know, encounter when they're going down a street as you're placing things in different places. So
exactly, yeah.
So that's all, I think, a part of us all being a part of making that a little bit safer. If we're looking at performance, you know, the good thing on this particular slide is we didn't have any injuries. So I know, which is always great when there are no injuries. I mean, we've had the 4 preventables and then there are non-preventables. Nothing that rises to the level of severity. But the good point on this is, again, you know, no injuries across the board. So I'm very excited about that always. As far as our human resources, we are still in a good place. I added a new chart. I'm not sure if you can read it. I'll try to make it a little bit better. I was trying to add people into it, make it a little more dynamic, but we'll keep working on that and trying to get that a little bit larger where you can see it better. But I mean, we're in a good place as far as recruiting. If you recall, last month, you had an opportunity to hear from our HR recruiter manager, Courtney, who does a fabulous job. So no worries in reference to our staffing and recruiting. You know, we'll constantly stay on top of that. And in closing this out, you know, again, we made some improvements on on-time performance. We exceeded our goals with our mean distance between road miles, our customer complaints and preventable accidents per 10,000. So overall, I mean, you're looking at the data minus the OTP, you know, we did have a good month, and I'm open for any questions.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions for Mr. Cooksey?
I just think we do have some excellent drivers. This is Lee. And from what I've seen, and I ride quite a few of those buses in Columbia, and I go different areas. So we have some good drivers, and I just want that point to be made known that we can give them applause. We do have some excellent drivers out there, very courteous, and you can't ask for any more with the public, because I know there can be some people sometimes can be very arrogant, but they really know how to handle it. So that's my point. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that input, Mr. Clayton. All right, then we'll go on to 5E, Ridership Analysis, Eric. And I'll just remind us all that we know that Eric's report is a little on a little bit different time frame, because he's doing the route analysis from the general ridership that Mr. Cooksey's reported. So there's a time delay in that. Eric? what do you have to tell us?
Absolutely. So weekday ridership, and this is for the month of January, but weekday ridership is down by 10% from December. We're up by 28% for Saturday and up by 5% for Sunday. Amongst the corridor routes, Route 801 has by far performed the best for the last few months. It has increased in ridership for 4 consecutive months, from October to now. The route has gone from carrying 8,000 passengers to 11,000 passengers in January, so it's really performing well, the Harbison corridor area. But it's actually 701 Forest Acres that is the best performing route when comparing to ridership 2020, using January as the base month. So Route 701 is really performing well. It looks like in due time, well, it still will take quite a bit of time. Hopefully we'll see that route reach the level of normalcy before any other routes. Outside of that, Route 32 isn't too far removed as well. It's a good route, but needless to say, DART is down by 36%. So of course, it's not the greatest number to hear, but it is a good sign as we try to get back to pre-pandemic numbers as a whole. But again, we try not to dwell too far on the pre-pandemic numbers as, I guess, as a basis of comparison, because we know it would take a little time in order to get there. But this kind of gives us the potential of what we can achieve in these given corridors. So specifically looking at Saturday service alone, all routes pretty much saw an increase in ridership except for Route 76. But ridership was down by 60% for Route 76 last month. Well, it was up by 60% last month. So it's not really an issue at all, really looking at Saturday level service, and the same applies really for Sunday. The only route that truly decreased in ridership was Route 75, and it was by 22%. So again, not too much of a headache there. So we're looking good for weekend level of service. And quite frankly, that concludes my analysis for the ridership report. And I know.
All right.
So
I know you're on next, but hold a minute. Let me just be sure we have any questions for Eric on the ridership. Okay, well now let's go on and move on to 5F on you and Pam can update us on the soda cap improvement proposal.
Okay, I can go ahead and start us off. Right now we have all hands on deck in terms of making sure we propose a service modification. We previously met with Columbia Fireflies. They are in the process of approving a route for the upcoming season that is scheduled for April 8th. And they're gonna have 3 back-to-back home games. We have contacted the local universities and are anticipating a series of meetings before proposing any changes in the schedule, also in the service time spans, and also looking at any routing adjustments. We have further engaged Flock and Rally to develop a formal project scope based on what the planning staff has recommended, marketing, Flock and Rally, marketing, and also what the data is telling us. So they're going to take a look at everything as a whole to make sure that we're capturing everything that will, I guess, be more conducive to what our service area is demanding.
And I'd like to add to what Eric is saying, preliminary outreach to our business and tourism partners has been really positive. And before I could call Experience Columbia, which is the tourism arm of Columbia, they actually called me and said that they have named Soda Cap as their business partner of the month, because they said as tourism has increased in Columbia, more people are asking, what is that bus that goes around Columbia, around the downtown into the, the tourist attractions. And they said that people are requesting more information about Soda Cap and actually riding it. So.
All right. So do you think now, when do you think, what's your timetable now for when
For the
we'll have a
plan?
proposal?
By May.
By
May
May.
is our target, yes.
All right. May's going to be a big month all around, aren't it?
Yeah.
Oh,
May.
Okay. So any questions? Any questions or comments from the committee to Pam and Eric on the Soda Cap? All
Ms.
right.
Moody,
Sounds like we're working on the right things.
And Ms. Mood, if I can just add this one piece,
Yes.
if everything goes well, we have the plan in place by May. It looks like the service will actually go into effect in August.
Okay.
August,
Okay.
at the earliest.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, then then that takes us to, thank you for that. And that takes us to 5G, and this is the Route 96X. And you know, I asked at the board meeting for a motion to allow us to do some analysis of that route. I'll just remind you that 96X was express service that went to
93.
93. I'm sorry, 93X. Sorry about that. From to Newberry, and that was one of the routes that had just gotten started on the pilot when we ran into COVID, and so that service got suspended. And now that we've reinstated it, it's really been very difficult to try to recapture a population that originally was the reason that we started the pilot. The request from people who had ridden it before when it was run by the Council on Aging, because in Newberry, because as you would expect, people with jobs have had to make other arrangements for riding. So I've been in conversation with Mr. Kuhn, who's our advisory member from Chapin, to talk about what should we take another look at, what populations that route is intended to serve, and what modifications we might want to make in rather than just continuing to run out the pilot in the existing kind of configuration. And my thought really is that we may have more potential riders who are getting to jobs along that route than than people who are riding from one end of the route all the way into Columbia. And so Mr. Kuhn is enthusiastic about pulling together the representatives, both elected representatives and business representatives from towns and jurisdictions along that route, to just explore what other possibilities there are for the future of an express route on that along that corridor. And what the board's permission to the committee to do that would allow Eric to help us with some of the analysis and the numbers that we would need to take to those communities to talk about what changes or recommendations they would make. And this is important in another way, because if we are going to sustain this beyond a pilot, we have to have funding for it, and the funding would really need to come from some help with from those jurisdictions. So we've not gotten started, but I wanted to say that I will be meeting with Mr. Kuhn, and we'll be meeting with community members from the businesses and elected representatives along that route. And any of the rest of the service committee members who have an interest in this and want to be a part of any of those discussions, you would be so welcome. And I'll make sure that anytime we have meetings scheduled, I'll get that word out to you so that you can participate in any way you can, because I think all of us benefit the more broadly the input is that we get. But that's all I have on that, unless you have questions.
Ms. Moon,
Yes.
my question is, do we still have the people that carpool into the state agencies there on Bull Street, like DHEC, Mental Health, and DSS, and some of the people used to work around there to the hospital? Do we still have people that carpool in there down there at that point where they would come on in? Do you know?
I don't know about carpools. I know that we've had some van pools and I'm not sure about where their destinations are. And the 96, I don't know why I keep wanting to say 96, 93X did have several places that it stopped off in town. And that's one of the things that I'm thinking about, is that it may be that where we need to put our emphasis on is how to get folks to the super stop at Harbison, because then they would have other ways to get into town for the rest of that route. So that's really kind of where my thinking is going, is rather than running the express the whole way, one of the things we might consider is, do we just get them to the nearest connecting point to the rest of the system. Right, right. So you're thinking the same way I am. Okay, any other questions? All right, then we'll move on to the 6th, the special COVID-19 update. 6A, the comet operations related to COVID, Mr. Cooksey and Mr. DeChamps.
Yeah, I don't have anything to report on that.
Yeah, I don't have anything else.
Nothing, no new update on that. Okay. And how about Pam, how about the vaccination program and impacts?
I have my memo as information. I do want to call your attention to the numbers for February. We had a bumper crop month in January for testing with over 3,000 tests. That number's leveled out in February to 892, which is still above what we saw in the first 5 or 6 months of the campaign. But it is substantially lower than that 3,000 that we saw in January. Likewise, with, and we attribute a lot of that to people being able to have testing delivered to their home, the in-home testing. With the vaccines, for the first time, the numbers have dipped under 150, with 96 vaccines at Comet Central. But that still brings our total impact to 14,881, and this completes our first year of the Don't Miss Your Shot campaign.
Oh, that's
Well,
good. Y'all did a real good job on that.
well, I will say, I think that whole effort of Don't Miss Your Shot has been an extraordinary contribution to the community as a whole and to our riders in particular. And I think what we're seeing in those numbers, the changes in those numbers that you described, sort of mirrors what we're seeing overall in terms of demands, as you pointed out, for testing and demands for vaccine. And I think we're probably at a point where we need to look at what needs are we need to continue to meet, and where at what point do we think that this might be not the best thing to continue. And I would appreciate your getting, the input from our partners who are delivering this service, as well as our DHEC partners, because I think the picture of testing, as you point out, with making available tests to people at home is going to impact what we're doing, because we were really trying to give access to people who might not otherwise have access. And then the vaccine levels, I mean, to my distress, that seems to have kind of leveled off at 53% in the state. And we're not seeing movement much in that anywhere. But I would think by our next meeting, you might want to have some analysis with both our resource partners and DHEC to say, do you have any recommendations on changes that we might want to make in this?
Sure, and we've already started those conversations, and on a preliminary basis, we're looking at probably going maybe at most another 6 months, unless there's a spike that occurs. And I would like to call your attention to that impact number of over 14,000 does not even take into consideration fixed route. Because remember, we were not able to.
You were delivering people to that.
Right. We were not able to directly count how many people were getting on the bus for their free ride to their COVID shot. But as Mr. Cooksey pointed out earlier, some of those bump in numbers were right around the Don't Miss Your Shot campaign. So, we can kind of say it's that had an impact as well.
So what we know is that there was an additional impact to the numbers that we can have on this chart.
Exactly. And I would say at least a 15-20% impact on those numbers.
Good. Well, I think that was a wonderful, has been a wonderful initiative. It's still meeting some needs. And so we'll look forward to the update at our next meeting on that.
Yes, ma'am. And one more thing, we have submitted the campaign to APTA, the American Public Transportation Association. in the category of marketing, messaging, and response to COVID-19. So we're crossing our fingers that they see the same value that.
I would hope that we'd get recognition for that. I'll do. All right. So any other questions or comments for Pam or for Leroy or Mr. Cooksey? Okay, well, then we only have one other agenda, and that's a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
And a second? And we'll take a voice vote on that. Aye. All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you.
We adjourn.
Thank you.